Call hello, Yahweh, Bashim Yahushai, Bashim Dash, double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone of Well. I am not a member, however, I've entered into their labors. Peace and mercy to the sincere brothers and sisters doing this wherever you are, whatever your lot may be. Another quick one. I was reading through 1 Samuel 24 this morning, and I'm going back again, and I'm reading, some of these longer stories. So like through David, through Solomon, pretty much the history. I'm going back and I'm reading it in chronological order. So I do a little bit each day, maybe 2 chapters, maybe sometimes 3 or 4. It just depends. And then, I continue on with, some additional reading. But these were my takeaways. And again, I want to be brief, especially, things that are, for one, things that are written aforetime are written for our learning, right? So we can learn from our forefathers, not just David, and not just learning from the good that they do, but we can also learn from, when they went off, how do we combat that, or how do we avoid that? What mindset should we be in? Watching those who produce evil fruit, and then, not be so naive as to think, it was just this one time. You have to keep your eye on people. Especially your enemy. Ecclesiasticus 12:10 tells you never trust your enemy. And all of this will be made apparent very soon, right? As this devil, he's going to come down. He's going to come down hard. He's got his robots. He's got all this stuff he needs to deal with Jacob. And not just, 2/3 aren't the threat. Well, they are the threat to, the average everyday Joe Schmo, so-called white T-man. But the big things, these big ticket items, right? These sci-fi movie type deal that we got, going on here, that is for the elect. That is for, the 144,000 and that mixed multitude, right? Those that will be receiving some sort of supernatural ability. Who knows what, and who knows when, and who knows how it'll come about. All I know, right, is that, God, Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, you're not going to get gifts like that out of the blue, okay? This is not, and 2/3 of our people have attributed the aspects of the Lord under the guise of an Edomite lens. And what that means is their version of, how people say, not my Jesus, not my God. Now, they think that the Lord is some sort of, welfare state where you can get whatever you want. You can do whatever you want, be disobedient, right? And in the end, when it's time to push the button and when it's time to go to work, you can just get whatever you need to get, right? Disregard anything, all of the times that you served yourself, all the times that you did not choose, Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, when you had the opportunity, you chose your own belly. And then all of a sudden you think that you're going to get some sort of reward. That is not how the Lord works. All right, Yahweh Shai. Of course, Yahweh Shai is of the Father. Okay, they are a separate entity. But when he says, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father. That means not only are they resembled, right, because we are made in His image, but they are of the same mind, right? As Yahweh Shai walked this earth in many different instances in these scriptures, He says, "I've come to do the will of my Father." So, the Lord is an austere man, and although He is merciful, right, you don't think that you are just going to come and demand protection and demand being covered and demand some sort of, whatever is in the wild minds of a 2/3 nigga. Well, it ain't going to work out for you, especially denying and scoffing the names. And so I say all that to say, these are my takeaways here, right? Keeping your integrity, know when to act, know when to stay your hand. And a prayer that I pray is that, Lord, when the time comes, when it gets that to the point to where it's ultra bad, right? We are officially third world country, and all of the amenities and the America that we once knew is truly over, and it is evident on every walk of life. I pray, Lord, whatever I'm supposed to do, let me hear that message as clear as I can see my hand in front of my face right now. And these are things that you got to pray, that you have to think about, okay? But it takes faith, because you'll hear that voice, and that means you need to listen to it, no matter what your flesh says. Your flesh will war against you. Your flesh, you'll hear the Lord clear as day in your mind. But the flesh is the flesh is an MF, right? The flesh is a bad motor scooter, right? It'll cause you to doubt, especially when we start to see things, when they truly implement the injectable for the detectable, right? When truly you see and your flesh is scared, that is going to affect your decision making. All the more we need to build that inner man, seeking the Lord while he may be found, reading through these scriptures and seeing, okay, what did our ancestors do in certain situations? What should my mind state be? What is an example of putting humility at the forefront? And you can find all of these in the scripture. This is your glistening sword here. You need to keep it sharp, and works as well as you want it to work, as well as the effort that you put into it, right? Okay, and the last little point that I made, and this is just going to be, that's why I decided to make it as quick as possible. The lowly, humble route is what true strength is, okay? Now, walking away because you're scared is not the same as knowing what you could do, knowing what you know, and still deciding, all right, I know that Yahweh Bashim Yahushua will cover me if I operate with humility. If there are instances where okay, I don't need to react this way, I need to do something different. But your flesh will jump up and tell you, man, fuck that. You got to have yourself in check, all right? Okay? So let's continue reading this, and then we'll go to Samuel 24 and gather the points that we need to gather as we move. All right, so the lowly, humble route is true strength in certain situations, but seeking the Lord and knowing the mind of the Lord via the scriptures is the way you strengthen that decision-making skill, right? Because the more you hear, the more you read, the more you come up under the proper vibration, the easier it is to understand, okay, I know the Lord wouldn't like that, even though in certain situations it may be lawful, but I know in this instance I need to exercise some scruples. I need to behave in a certain manner. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to 1 Samuel, and I'm going to read it in the NLT here just for brevity's sake. Okay, so after Saul returned from fighting the Philistines, he was told David had gone into the wilderness. So all right, he hunting David, and unjustly, might I add. Okay. The Lord told Saul that the backstory, the Lord told Saul that the kingdom would be rent and it would go to David, and Saul wasn't having it. So Saul, in a back and forth attempt about, one, he's like, oh my God, what have I done? And then that spirit comes upon him and he's like, I got to slay David. I got to keep what I got. I got to maintain this kingdom. It is mine. Right. But once the Lord takes something from you, it is no longer yours. There's nothing you can do. Okay. So he chose those 3,000 elite troops. Right. Okay, so it's important that we say that, read that, because David snuck in, all right? But we're going to keep going, okay? All right. I'm going to say, but as it happened, David and his men were hiding further back in that very cave, okay? Now's your opportunity, David's men whispered to him. And this could be, certain things, certain left-handed spirits. If we equate this to, on a lower scale, things that we deal with day to day, all right, those left-handed spirits could be whispering in your ear, man, you could blah, blah, blah. You could, and you'd be well within your rights too. That nigga trying to kill you. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to be able to internalize and be a visionary with this and make these situations fit present day. You have to do that. So let's continue on. All right, today the Lord is telling you, I will certainly put your enemy into your power. Do with as you wish. So David crept forward, cut off a piece of the hem of Saul's robe. But then David's conscience began bothering him because he had cut Saul's robe. He said to his men, the Lord forbid that I should do this to my Lord the king. I should attack the Lord's anointed one. For the Lord himself has chosen him. So David restrained his men and did not let them kill Saul. After Saul had left the cave and gone on his way, David came out and shouted after him, my Lord, the king. And when Saul looked around, David bowed low before him. All right, so David's face was to the ground, all right, bowing to a man who wants to take his life unjustly. Now, the world may see that as wickedness, but again, there are specific situations on where lowly and contrition, being low and being contrite will get you the result that you need. Okay, David trusted in the Lord. The Lord told David he would be king. So David was like, all right, this ain't the way. I want to walk upright. Beautiful, beautiful thing to read, beautiful thing to equate to your everyday life. and be pleasing unto Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. Verse 10, this very day you can see with your own eyes. It isn't true, for the Lord placed you at my mercy back there in the cave. Some of my men told me to kill you, but I spared you. For I said, I will never harm the king. He is the Lord's anointed one. Look, my father, at what I have in my hand. It is a piece of the hem of your robe. Like, see, I could have. You know what I'm saying? And I think that to me, that's more player than anything, right? In this specific instance, okay? This proves that I am not trying to harm you and that I have not sinned against you, even though you have been hunting for me to kill me. May the Lord judge between us. Perhaps the Lord will punish you for what you are trying to do to me, but I will never harm you. As that old proverb says, from evil people come evil deeds. So you can be sure I will never harm you. Who is the king of Israel trying to catch anyway? Should he spend, there's a little more humility here, putting a little sauce on it. Should he spend his time chasing one who is as worthless as a dead dog or a single flea? May the Lord therefore judge with which of us is right and punish the guilty one. He is my advocate, and he will rescue me from your power. When David had finished speaking, Saul called back, is that really you, my son, David? Then he began to cry, and he said to David, you are a better man than I am, for you have repaid me good for evil. And there are precepts about repaying your brother good for evil, right? Not these devils, okay? That is not, because they will try to twist the scripture. But even at the end of the day, vengeance is the Lord, all right? And the Lord will either, you gonna have to wait on the Lord, all right? But at the same time, scripturally, are you wrong? Like, this whole Nolan situation, would you be wrong if they did something to your child and you do it to theirs? You would not. That is not something that is, according to the scriptures, criminally or punishable. But, we are speaking specific instances here, a time where discernment is needed. And I think that'll be the title, knowing when this or knowing how to utilize your discernment and see something along those lines. All right. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and continue on with verse 19. Who else would let his enemy get away when he had him in his power? May the Lord reward you well for this kindness you have shown me today. And now I realize that you are surely going to be king, and that the kingdom of Israel will flourish under your rule. All right. So that's really it, man. It's a beautiful story. Continue to read if you haven't read through, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, the Kings and Chronicles and stuff like that. The history that is important. All right. So with that being said, I truly pray that you are edified. Shalom.